Hello and welcome to the first in our series of podcasts for Equine Health Week in partnership with Agria. And this year we are focusing on how we can best support our horses through all the key life stages that they're going to go through. Because this is day one, we are starting logically with breeding and conception. So the very, very beginning of bringing your horse into the world. And we are going to sort of go through those early stages while the foal is still with his mother. Joining me to talk about this, I've got three experts in the field of reproduction and breeding. So first up is Dr. Jan Birch, who is co-chair of the British Horse Foundation alongside Yogi Breisner. She has a PhD in veterinary physiology from the University of Cambridge and is currently an honorary senior research fellow based at the University of Liverpool's School of Veterinary Sciences. Her specialist research interests are reproduction, lactation, metabolic stress and growth. So she is a perfect person to have here on our panel. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me.
Next up is Edward Matson, who is Vice Chair of the British Horse Foundation and the Managing Partner of Twemlow's Stud Farm, one of the UK's leading artificial insemination, embryo transfer and OPU ICSI centres. He's developed a number of CPD training courses for vets and non-vets around foaling the mare and foal and yearling management. Welcome, Edward.
Thank you very much. No, it's great to be part of it. Thank you.
And last but by no means least, I've got Rebecca Keating, who is a resident stud vet at Twemlow's Stud Farm, and she's been there since 2020. After graduating in 2017, she worked as a resident stud vet at a large stud farm in Ireland before joining Liphook Equine Hospital in 2019. Among her responsibilities at Twemlow's is the management of the recipient mare herd and mares for insemination and embryo transfer. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hello, hi everyone.
So let's get going. First up, what do we need to consider when we're choosing whether or not to actually breed our horses? How do we know if it's the right thing to do? Jan, do you want to get us going with this one?
Yeah, it's probably the most important question of all, and that is the need to breed. And actually, World Horse Welfare tackled that problem and looked at indiscriminate breeding. Because there's a big problem if we've got unwanted horses, they're just going to end up in rescue centres. So we really need to think about it. And one of the main problems you find is if you've got a poor quality foal, because if it's not saleable or if it's got behavioural problems or it's got any health problems and they can't be ridden, they're the ones that actually do end up unwanted at the end of the day. And it's actually really interesting when you look at it that a lot of the foals are actually bred by homebred amateur breeders. And sometimes you just have to reflect and think, are they breeding for the right reason? Or are they actually just thinking, oh, well, this is my mare and I really love her and I can't think what else to do, so I'll breed a foal. So, yeah, it's a big thing. And you need to sort of consider, what is your actual purpose for breeding? What's your actual end point? What are you trying to achieve? And have you got the time and resources to actually deal with it and the knowledge to back it up? And most important of all, are you actually breeding from a quality mare and you've got a complementary stallion that's going to go with it? And, one of the things that I think comes up more than anything else is, has your mare got a good temperament, no matter whatever else? If she hasn't got the right temperament, don't breed from her. And I think the next thing to really think about is, her soundness. Has she actually stayed sound during her working life? Because again, don't try and breed from a mare that's got conformational issues or that's not stayed sound. Then I suppose above and beyond that, look at how successful she's been. And I'm not really just talking here of has she been successful in a competitive way, because you might have a mare who has been really successful, who might have been a therapy horse. So don't just always think, where's my competition record? There's horses that have very, very good uses across a whole range. And in fact, some of the RDA horses are very specialist. And yeah, so really think about whether you've got a good brood mare there. I think is a really good starting point. And I suppose the next thing going on from that is selecting your stallion. When you're selecting the stallion, you've got to be really critical of your mare. So actually look at the downsides of your mare and try and improve her. But please, please don't use that as an excuse to breed from a mare that's got a poor temperament or poor conformation. So we're taking that bit as read, but then we're going to look at which bits we could improve. And then the next thing you want to do is make sure that you have in mind exactly what you're wanting to produce. What are you aiming for? And does your stallion take you towards that goal? Is that likely to give you the offspring, the foal you're looking for? Having got those bits in your head, the next thing to do is to go to the stallion gradings and aim for those gradings that give you all the details you'll want. So they might have a veterinary examination, DNA testing, you've got all the competition records, you get to see the stallions loose and ridden, according obviously to their age and discipline. And if you see stallions there that you like, see if you can then go and get chance to go and speak to people who have used that stallion. Are they pleased with the foal that they've got? And I think they'd be sensible in terms of thinking about your own position. So if you can manage to speak to people who are wanting to have a horse in the same sort of manner, you know, at home amateur or something like that, then that would be great. And then I think the other thing to think about is you tend to get fashions in which sort of stallions are being used, and try and think above and beyond those if you can. So there's been quite a lot of people wanting to use warm bloods because they're very extravagant and have got great movement. But have a little think, because that may lead, something with an extravagant motion may have more lameness issues. They might, although a lot of them have got really good temperaments, they might be a little bit too much for an amateur rider. So have a think about what you actually want. And there seems to be a trend a little bit going towards more of native crosses. So have a little, try and be really realistic about what you're trying to breed for, and not just go with the latest fashion on what it might be.
Okay, then. So we've done the thinking. We've been through all of this process. As you say, there's a lot of thought that goes into this. It's not quite as simple as I want a foal out of my mare, but we've decided it's the right thing to do. What factors then do we need to consider, the kind of the practicalities around breeding a mare and actually getting her in foal?
Thank you. Well, I'll come in there, and then Rebecca will follow it on. So I think one of the important, what's this going to cost me to get my mare in foal initially? So I think one has to sort of from a mare perspective, the costs. And if you're using a veterinary practice, a stud farm, an AI centre, usually they'll offer a routine package to do all the work to get your mare in foal, the artificial insemination, or if she is going off for a natural cover, to set the mare up and get her right. And one sort of thinking ahead, you might want to plan on 1.5 sort of cycles, a cycle and a half for AI and with fresh and chilled semen, and maybe sort of 2 cycles might cost you for frozen semen. Just depends how quickly the mare is going to take and her breeding history. So you're looking at those costs. The minimum, could be £1,000, but you could be spending on generally £2,000 or £3,000 on getting the veterinary package, getting your mare in foal from that perspective. So that's the costs on that side. Then some people will be looking to do embryo transfer, where obviously you take an embryo out and flush an embryo out, and you transfer it into a recipient mare, and the costs involved for that are about sort of 5,500. These costs are all plus VAT, and that would include the hire of the recipient. So that's a sort of indication on your costs. And the other side of cost is obviously the stud fee for the stallion. And they vary from, say, as low as maybe £400-500 up to £3,000. But what is important, when you're looking at on the cost side, is also the terms. The terms for which stallions are available with their semen will vary tremendously. So do look at the sort of the fine print and the flexibility that they offer within foals, free returns, live foal guarantees, how many doses you get with frozen. So that's sort of an important aspect. And then some people will be looking at the stallion's fertility, the pregnancy rates. So a lot of people sort of say, oh, what's the semen quality like for that stallion? That is important, but it's always good to find out what the pregnancy rate is for that stallion. We've often seen people say, oh, how was the quality of semen good? And I think it's more important to see what the actual stallion pregnancy rate is. We see quality semen that looks great, but the pregnancy rates aren't always the highest, and you have some other semen, the quality of semen's doesn't look the best, but it still gets you good pregnancy rates. So that's important. And also with frozen semen, it's how many straws per dose, because it varies. When you're buying frozen semen from a stallion, it might be 1 straw per dose, or it can be 6 to 8 straws per dose. The important thing is that 1 dose must contain between 200 to 300 million progressive motile sperm is a dose. So people get often confused because they'll say, yes, you get 1 straw or you get 5 straws per dose. So it is just understanding that side of things. So that's very much on that side. And then you've got to think about the timing. Really, I'm thinking about the timing of the 3 different types of semen. So you're thinking of a stallion, and you can have fresh semen when the stallion is on the same site generally as the mare, or you get chilled semen, which is where it's sent to you from somewhere within the UK or somewhere from in Europe, and that tends to get next day delivery. So you're fresh and you're chilled. And those 2 types of semen get put in before the mare ovulates. And then with fresh semen, that if you're using that, basically the semen will last up to sometimes up 48 hours in the reproductive tract, whereas chilled semen, because it's already arrived from Europe, chilled, that sometimes is 24 to 48 hours that it will work in the mare once it's in the reproductive tract. Just an important aspect with Europe now is when you're bringing in chilled semen from Europe is the health papers. Because you're bringing in from Europe the importing, and it has got very complex, very complicated, and it is best if you're bringing in chilled semen from Europe really to do it through a importing agent. There's various importing agents in the UK who will help you bring in your semen, because you do get occasions when the semen, you've ordered it and it doesn't arrive, it gets held and doesn't get through. So that's important. So you've got your 2 types of semen you've got to think of, and then your third is obviously your frozen semen. We, as a business, we quite like using frozen semen because it's in the tank. The quality of frozen semen today is much better than years ago, and the veterinary techniques for doing it. So it works well, generally frozen, but you have got to have the mare set up right. You've got to work closely with your vet. Ideally, you want to inseminate a mare with frozen semen within 6 hours of ovulation. And to get this timing right, it's really best if you can be scanning the mare in her last sort of 48 hours, 24 hours before you believe she's going to ovulate. And you'll be, as I said, working with your vet on this. You're doing it up to 4 times a day. You'll be scanning the mare to try and get it right. So that's the sort of important aspect with the timing overall. Timing is crucial to achieve good results.
And if Edward's just kind of very much had the stud management hat on there, I'm just going to come in with some of the veterinary aspect of it. So, what do we need to think about first with mares? Very much that they're long day breeders. So what does that mean? We have long days, long hours of sunlight in the summertime, and then obviously in the winter we get shorter daylight hours. So horses very much are cycling when we've got long daylight hours. Now, a thing that people is a misconception between a large amount of people, I would say, is that we see our thoroughbreds are trying to keep to that 1st of January birth date. So they want the foals to be born as close to the 1st of January as possible. So they have artificially induced those mares to cycle using lighting. So they'll have artificial lights on in the stables from when we get darkness. They'll have 16 hours of light a day, usually from about the 1st of December. So that's why we see those mares cycling early and vets scanning them, and they're getting covered around February time. In the sports horse world, I would say that that's not so common. We're normally not riding sport horses until they're 4 or 5 years old. So keeping as close to the January birth date is not as important. Therefore, we always remember that the average date for a mare's first ovulations, that's the first cycle they have in the season in the UK, is about middle of April. So, you know, we're still quiet here at Twemlows. We haven't covered any mares yet. And, you know, the mares naturally in their own cycles are not ready yet. We do have some that we have had under lights, recipient mares, ready for when the mares do come in. So we have some ready. So when the mares do start to cycle and they have had their first ovulation of the season, they tend to ovulate every 21 days. So they're on a 21-day cycle. So when your vet will come out, you're thinking about breeding, you know, what are they going to do? They're going to assess where in the cycle the mare is. Now, more experienced vets are going to be more accurate at determining that. And there's certain things that trigger us to where the mare might be in her cycle. So we talk about progesterone is the pregnancy hormone, or when the mare is not in season, we're going to have an ovulation, a corpus luteum releasing progesterone. The mare is not in season, so we're going to be able to see that from the mare's uterus. Whereas when they're in season, they're growing a big follicle, getting ready to ovulate. The uterus is bigger, tends to have a lot of fluid, edema, and she looks like she's in season. So the vet's going to be able to assess that and tell you where she is. It's really helpful to have a vet, I would say. My experience from looking at over 100, you know, mares a day is that you actually very rarely can really see, very clearly that one is teasing. A lot of stud farms, especially thoroughbred stud farms that are doing live cover, use a teaser, and they'll use the teaser to see what the mare is doing. But, you know, not every mare is going to show to a teaser. So that's where the veterinary side is really important. The vet's going to go through with you the history of the mare, the age, and give you recommendations on their experience. What would be the best option according to Edward's different options there with fresh semen, frozen semen, and chilled. And they're also able to manipulate the cycle. So like when we were talking about when we've got chilled semen from Europe, we have to think about the postman. So the postman is only delivering from Tuesday to Saturday. So your vets can manipulate cycles. So we can shorten cycles by about a week, depending on where the mare is, to adjust to suit that postage and to work with owners to kind of get the timings exactly right. We can also manipulate cycles to make mares ovulate at the correct time. So we were saying how crucial it is with chill semen. You know, it's not got as much of a longevity as fresh semen, so we need to get the timings exactly right. So we'll have hormones that we can use to manipulate the cycle. I often get asked by owners, does this hormonal manipulation affect the fertility rates in mares? I would say definitely not. It improves fertility rates because we're getting the timings better. But obviously, the more experienced the vet is, and with time, then you're going to be doing those things at the correct time. So if I've had a mare, you know, that's in season for quite a few days and I'm really happy with how she looks, then I'm going to administer the hormone at the correct time, which is going to increase our chances of fertility. So that's very much where the vet would come in and play their part in that situation.
Yeah, so it's key then, I'm taking from this, that you work with a vet who's really experienced in breeding and reproduction to make sure that, you know, these timings that you said, they're so precise, you've got to get them spot on. So by working with a vet who's knowledgeable in this area, you've got a far greater chance of success, or indeed sending your mare away to somewhere like, you know, like you guys, who can actually go through that process and work it all out for you.
Absolutely. It's cost, and it's also getting your mare pregnant as soon as possible. And but then a lot of people will have problem breeding mares. You know, mares have got breeding history, and you know, that's something that is always supported by the vet. You know, that's very important.
Okay, so we've been through with this process. We've got the mare pregnant. It's all gone beautifully and swimmingly, as it should, as we want. She's now pregnant. How should we be looking after her through the next however many months that she's going to be incubating that baby to get a healthy, hopefully foal at the end of it?
Yeah, so I would say working again with your vet is going to help you a lot in this manner. So we have kind of key pregnancy scans that we want to do. Now that varies kind of depending on your vet, but most vets kind of the industry standard would be a 14-day scan after breeding would be your initial first pregnancy scan. Now, why is that so crucial? That's probably the most crucial scan because often horses will ovulate 2 follicles and there is a chance that they might have twins. Now, the likelihood of a mare carrying twins to full term is unfortunately very, very unlikely and comes with a lot of complications, such as, most of the mares will abort at 7 to 8 months if they have twins. So that's why we need to get in early at the 14-day stage, and we need to reduce one of those pregnancies at a chance where it's, so if we find them at 14 days and we reduce them, that the chances of having one single live foal born is very high. So we're quite meticulous about that. If we have owners going home, we always like to reiterate, you really need to be back here by day 14, 15. If you're coming at 16, 17, that again already can be too late. So again, with your crucial timing there with horses, we need to be really particular. We're normally checking them again for a heartbeat at around 28 days. And once more at 45 days. Some vets may or may not do that. That is something that's normally to do with stallion contracts, and the likelihood of early embryonic pregnancy loss goes down quite a lot after 45 days. So we do like to recommend that scan here at Twemlow's. If you do want your fetus sexed, that's something that we can do at around the 60 to 70 day mark, or again at 120 days. And then late pregnancy scanning, I often get people asking me about, oh, should I get my mare scanned late into pregnancy? Is it too risky? It's definitely something that I would recommend doing, in the winter. It often gives people peace of mind if they know, okay, the deaf mare definitely still is pregnant, and just even to have your vet out to have a chat, look over the mare, how do you think she's doing, and just kind of go over all the things that we need to be thinking about over the winter, is my recommendation. Normally those things kind of match up with, we talk about these vaccines that we give to mares when they're pregnant. So herpes is a big thing that we talk about with pregnant mares. So it is a virus that causes the common cold in most horses, but unfortunately it can cause abortion with pregnant mares, and there is a vaccine that can really reduce the risk of that. So that is kind of one of the top ones that vets recommend for pregnant mares. That needs to be done at 5, 7, and 9 months of pregnancy. So normally people are getting the vet out to do those vaccinations, and that's a time when the vet can do a scan on your mare, check the placental health, check that everything's looking as it should, and just kind of have a chat and a catch up with you about how you're doing. We also recommend the rotavirus vaccine to reduce. Rotavirus is a virus that causes diarrhea in young foals, and it can be quite detrimental. So that is something that's done at 8, 9, and 10 months. So you're scanning your vaccines, so rota and herpes virus. And talking about that herpes again, biosecurity is a big thing that's going to come in there. So it does cause the common cold. In a lot of horses, especially youngsters, if we think about kids going to school and going to creche, they pick up all these viruses. So though it's like imagining if those viruses then were able to cause abortion, then we need to keep our young stock separate from our pregnant mares. So that's really important. The other thing that I always say to people is get really familiar with your mare's udder, your mare's vulva. You want to be checking it twice a day. You should be checking your pregnant mare twice a day anyway. Always have a little look at the udder. You don't want to see any early development of milk. They will start to develop some milk there at about a month before they're foaling, but any earlier than that is concerning, and you don't want to see any discharge from the vagina. So they're all signs that maybe the fetus is under stress for some reason and cause for concern. So definitely need to be speaking to your vet if you see anything like that.
And then I think the other aspects of that is, of course, your nutrition and your management and care. And I would say, first of all, on nutrition, work with your nutritionist. It's always so important. Anything you're doing with horses, work together in a team. We've talked here about the veterinary input, and we need a nutritionist as well. But just to give a quick talk through, from a nutrition point of view, ideally you need to be thinking about the nutrition of your mare before she even comes to stud. So as soon as you're thinking about, oh, actually, I'd like to breed from my mare, that's the time you should be thinking about the nutrition, because you need to make sure that she's got a body condition score of about 3 to 3.5 on a 1 to 5 scale, so just above sort of midway. But in an ideal world, we could do with her on what's known as a rising plane of nutrition. So we could do with her just as she's about to come to be covered, that she's just putting a little bit of body condition on just at that point, because that actually improves their fertility. Once she's pregnant, in the first sort of two trimesters, she shouldn't necessarily need too much additional hard feed, but we do want to make sure that she's got balanced nutrient intake and that she's got good quality proteins. So if you're in any doubt at all about the quality of your pasture or your quality of your forage, you could do with using a stud balancer. But again, speak to your nutritionist, have a look how it looks. And remember that growth is really happening right from conception, because there's the growth of the uterus, there's the growth of the placenta, as well as the growth of the foal. So you need to make sure that you've got all those balanced nutrients there right the way through. In the final trimester, so the last third of the pregnancy, it does need a little bit more thought, because at that point you're going to have quite a rapid increase in growth of the foal within the uterus. And at the same time, as it's growing, it's actually using all the space up. So just at the point when you need extra nutrients, there's less space for them to be contained. So that's the point where you actually need to be thinking of having smaller feeds given more regularly. And it's a time when you need to increase the nutrient density. So rather than it being your forage, which has got a lower nutrient density, you actually need to be thinking of supplementing with hard feed all the way through. And it's really, as I say, it's really important that you actually have all those good nutrients available. But the flip side of that is you don't want your pregnant mare getting fat. So if her body condition score gets too high, your foal won't be any bigger. You're not going to get a higher birth weight foal, but there is actually a much higher likelihood of there being complications at foaling. So you need to keep a good eye on your mare all the way through and make sure that you've got her condition score right. And again, diet will also affect the quality of the mare's milk. So you've got to think that you're feeding also for the quality of milk once the foal's born. So the quality of the colostrum and the antibodies in your first milk will be affected as well. So work with your nutritionist from as soon as you decide to breed, because it's important all the way through. From a management point of view, it's important your pregnant mares get adequate daily exercise to keep them fit. It doesn't matter whether that's turnout in a paddock. They can be lightly ridden in the first trimester if they're comfortable to do so. But it's sometimes nicest to actually turn them out into a herd to pasture. But it's important to make sure it's a herd where they're all compatible and they all get on well. What you don't want is your mare stressed, because that really won't help her. And actually, there's some evidence now that that won't help the behaviour of the foal and the temperament of the foal once it's born either. So it's important that you do that. And in fact, we've we've had a recent paper come out, which is in the Equine Veterinary Journal, which is entitled Start 'em Young, Treat 'em Right, How Horses' Early Life Experiences Can Set Them Up for Success in Life. And it's been sponsored by the British Horse Foundation, and it's been written by Gemma Pearson and Janet Douglas. And it's really, really interesting because in there it actually talks about some of the impacts of maternal stress during pregnancy and the impacts that might possibly have on our foals. So there's a lot more we still need to find out, but it's really keep that in mind as you're going through.
Thank you, Jan. And as well, while we're sort of talking on the subject of young horses, make sure you check out tomorrow's podcast, little spoiler for you there, where we are talking about giving the best life experiences to your young horse once he's left mum. So we are now right up to the tea time. We've got through pregnancy. Everything's looking good. Babies are out to arrive. What do we do now?
Thank you. Well, usually a pregnancy is about 340 days. So you want to get your date right with the stud or where your mare was AI'd or naturally covered. And then you've got to decide where you're going to foal your mare. Are you going to foal her at home, or are you going to foal her at a stud farm or a veterinary practice? So if you're sort of taking away from home, you ideally really want the mare to go and settle in before she is going to foal. So 2 weeks before, you would ideally take her to wherever you would like her to foal if it's not home, so she gets familiar and she recovers from her transport. And then if you're foaling at home, it's looking at stable size. Usually you want a minimum of 12 by 12. Sometimes the stables are bigger depending on the size of your horse. The stable needs to be clean, disinfected, and a good deep bed of straw. So that's the sort of basic environment. Then you want to have your foaling kit ready. Now, some of the essentials that you want in your foaling kit are scissors, an enema, a feeding bottle, tail bandage, the umbilical clamp, gloves, lube, and obviously one of the most crucial things is the umbilical dip. You must have that. So those are sort of things that you would want to have in your foaling kit. Then monitoring your mare, there's various forms of doing this. Obviously, foaling cameras today with technology is very straightforward. So having cameras in the boxes where your mare's foaling, and these can often be seen you can go to your mobile phone now. So they're very good and effective. And then there's other alarms to alert you when your mare is due to foal. So you have the stitching alarms. that are available. There's various forms of those. There's tilt alarms. There's several options on those. And there's also the sweat alarms. So those are the main ones. There's also the pH strips on the electrolyte of the mare's milk. So you can test the mare's milk and buy these strips, and they give an indication in the last 24 hours. So those are the sort of key areas of preparing for foaling. You know, do be prepared that mares can foal sometimes 2 weeks early, and they can foal 2 weeks, even a month late sometimes. So just, you know, there can be quite a variation. But I think the most important factor is to try and be there, as we were always sort of brought up to when the mare is starting to foal, it's being there, supporting her, and obviously supporting the newborn.
And if I just come in with the veterinary side of things, you know, why is it so important to be there with a horse? I think, you know, of all the species that we learn about in veterinary medicine and when we're in university, unfortunately, when it comes to pregnancy with a horse, things, if you are not there, things can go wrong very quickly. Now, 95% of the time, statistically, they say that everything will go absolutely fine, but I think when things can go wrong, the second stage of labor, so there's 3 stages of labor that we talk about mainly in species. So the first stage of labor is normally when the contractions start, and that can be potentially go unnoticed in some mares. Some clients might even say, oh, she didn't seem any way abnormal to me. Maybe you might just see the mares kind of up and down and looking at their flank a little bit. And that stage ends when then the water breaks. So that's how we know that we're in stage 2 of labor. And that's very much the stage when Edward's saying be there, that's when you want to be there, okay, when the water is breaking. That can be very unpredictable though, especially in a horse. So, sometimes I have owners saying, but I checked her all night, for every hour. That stage 2 of labor in a horse should take no more than 30 minutes. So, even if you're checking them every hour, if 1 hour they're fine, but then suddenly 5 minutes later they decide, oh, I'm going to break my waters and start to foal, it can happen very quickly. So their uterine contractions are extremely powerful in comparison to when we see a cow or a sheep. They're extremely powerful, and this process is very short. Hopefully it goes uncomplicated. If there is a complication, then potentially we can miss them. So what are the kind of things that we might miss? And if we don't see any progress every 30 minutes, then sometimes very experienced foaling managers and vets for sure are going to come in and they're going to check for fetal positioning. So they're going to check, do I have my 2 legs and a head? A lot of people aren't going to be comfortable with that. That's why, you see a lot of places like Twemlow's here. We offer a foaling service. So that's for owners who want to just leave the mare with us. If there is any complication, we're very experienced with dealing with things. So we're going to be able to take over on that side. If you want to keep your mare at home, you can do that. But I would say phone your vet the minute you see stage 2 beginning. So the minute you see the waters breaking, most people, their vets are going to be at least a half an hour's drive away. So at least, even if the foal is out by the time they get there, at least they're on the way to you before things are going wrong, and they can get to you on time. The biggest thing that we talk about for owners at home is to know when you have a red bag delivery. So normally when the water break, we see the white bag, which is the amnion. So the amnion is the sac that the foal is sitting in the mare. Normally we see that present, so it's white, and you'll be able to see the foal legs and head normally through this nice white bag. If we see a red thick bag and you can't see the foal, that's a sign that we've had early separation of the placenta. Our foal's not going to have blood supply. It's very serious, and you need to be getting in there immediately with normally a scissors. It's quite thick, the bag, and you need to be opening and getting your foal out immediately. So they're the kind of things when we're talking about be there, especially with a horse. If you didn't see that red bag immediately and open it, then minutes, we're talking about minutes to save your foal. So that's why we have that with horses. Now, stage 3, so we talked about stage 1, stage 2, hopefully now our foal is delivered, everything's fine. Stage 3 is passing of the placenta, and that should happen within 3 hours. Again, horses, things can be complicated, unfortunately, with foalings. If the placenta is not passed within 3 hours, it's seen as an equine emergency. So equine vets, it's a known thing amongst us that there's a couple of things that we get phoned about that we're going to just drop everything and go. Foaling and placentas would definitely be high up on that list. So if your mare hasn't passed her placenta within 3 hours, another phone call that you need to be making. Tie up your placenta, get it out of the way, make sure the mare is not stepping on it and tearing on it. You don't want to be trying to force and pull it out. That could be quite a serious thing to do. So having a really good relationship with your vet, having them in your phone already saved, ready to call them, is a big, big thing to think about.
And you mentioned there about sort of night checks and things. Are most foals born at night, or do we see them sort of throughout the day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yeah, there's a lot of research gone into that now, and they know that horses are fight or flight animals. So they like to wait until everything goes quiet and, darkness. And that's because in the wild, they would have wanted to protect their newborn foal. So they tend to wait until they think there's no one around, things are still, and when there's no daylight, and that's when they tend to foal. I would say 98% of our mares here at Twemlow's would foal after 9-10 o'clock every day.
Yes, they would. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, when you've hit that period, don't expect to get a lot of sleep.
No.
Okay, so we've had a healthy delivery, baby's arrived. What then can we do to make sure that foal is getting the absolute best start in life, both in terms of sort of the veterinary and the healthcare side of things, but also the experiences that they're having, the management they're receiving?
Yeah, I think getting your vet out, the following day is always something that I recommend to people. Not everyone is going to run. I think Jan's going to talk. Jan's very much an expert on the area of lactation. But doing immunoglobulins testing. So that's the antibody level in a foal. So your vet can check that level and make sure that it's at an accurate level so that the foal is ready to fight off any infections in the area is very important. The other things your vet's going to look for is potentially some problems with limb conformation. The umbilical, that's going to want to be nice, dry, and that's an ongoing thing that you're going to be checking twice a day. So I always tell owners twice a day, you want to come in, especially talking about foals that are less than a month old. They're very delicate. You know, they're like human babies. We need to be really watching them carefully. So your umbilical wants to be, you know, nice and shrinking in size all the time, getting smaller, dry. It shouldn't have any discharge. We don't want to see any urine coming out of the umbilical. We want to check the temperature twice a day. I think that's really crucial. You know, foals, unfortunately, like babies, when they get sick, you know, sometimes they get very sick. We want to get in there nearly before they're showing signs that they're sick. So going off the suck or having diarrhea. So if we're checking the temperature twice a day, that can be a really good indicator that potentially something's not right with the foal. So your umbilical, your temperature, checking for diarrhea. Now, 75% of foals will get some sort of diarrhea in the first 2 weeks of life. A lot of the time that can just be a dysbiosis in the gut. So if the mare is eating really rich feed, then, you know, that can come out in the foal. And so we want to be kind of taking it with a pinch of salt that is the foal bright in every way, but has, you know, some diarrhea, and always speaking with your vet and getting some advice. I never mind if someone rings up, you know, just says, oh, my foal's poo is like this, what do you think? And going over on the phone with them, you know, what potentially could be the issue, and going from there. It's always nice to have peace of mind, just have a chat. That's no problem for us. And then if you're talking about the older foal, from about a month old, especially at Twemlow's here, we're going to be talking about rhodococcus. So rhodococcus is a bacteria that lives in the soil, especially on large scale stud farms, and it can cause abscesses on the lungs of foals. Now, these abscesses can normally show no clinical signs, and the foal can be very bright and happy, and they're kind of like a silent killer, we say. And then all of a sudden, maybe your foal is very sick, and then it's difficult to treat. So routine lung scans to monitor these abscesses are something that a lot of vets will recommend, something that we do here once a month. So that's for rhodococcus. And then other than that, when we get to the weaning stage, another bacteria that we have to think about is Lawsonia, that causes a GI inflammation in definitely weanlings. So from about 4 months to 8 months, we're seeing that. There is a vaccine that a lot of vets recommend for treatment of Lawsonia, reduces the risk. We do use that vaccine here at Twemlow's. And then most importantly, a big buzzword at the moment for anyone breeding horses now is worming. So the opposite that what we say with adult horses, you know, we're very much going down the line of not necessarily treatment, but monitoring, I would say. So a lot of adult horses won't necessarily get sick with worms, but, you know, we will see effects like ill thrift and things like that. But with foals, their immunity is lower. They can get very potentially high burdens of worms that can be life-threatening. So we're kind of combining the treatment and the monitoring when we're talking about worming with foals. And it's quite complicated. I definitely will get your vet's advice. Every person is going to have a different protocol depending on how many horses you've got on site, what your pasture management is like. But it's crucial that we are going to treat those foals from about 8 weeks old for worms. So that's something really important to think about if you are breeding.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah Rebecca. So, yeah, just coming back on just a couple of points you were talking about there. So, yeah, milk for the foal is so much more than nutrition. The first milk, the colostrum, obviously is absolutely essential for the antibodies to support the foal's really naive immune system. And it also has other benefits as well. So sort of suckling is essential for getting the mare-foal bond, which is really important for their sort of behavioural development, for learning, and also for protection of the foal, so that they're kept safe and within the herd as well. As Rebecca said, you need to check that colostrum right, at the point of birth to make sure that it's got the right concentration of antibodies in there. Hopefully, if you've got your nutrition right, it should be absolutely bob on. But you can't just risk that it might be right, because it is so crucial. And if it is too low, you need to give, obviously need to work with your vet. You need to give frozen colostrum via a stomach tube, or you need to give hyperimmune plasma IV. But your vet will work with you, but it's really crucial that's done. Other aspects, so if we're talking of management now, unless you've got a native pony, or some of the studs, particularly in Ireland, are still are foaling outside, but for most, you will be foaling indoors. And it's really important that you don't have turnout until you've had your vet look at your foal and particularly assess their limbs and their hoof balance. So whilst you've got them indoors, again, there's another thing you've got to be careful of, and that is that you've got a big enough space for a mare and foal. So, ideally 12 by 20. So ideally that you've got, proper space for the foal to start sort of wandering around in. But the thing that's really important is that you've got excellent ventilation. It's sometimes something that people forget. So foals are very prone to respiratory damage in the first week, and they may have, all sorts of minor traumas from birth, and that together with, if you've got a low ceiling, a small airspace or high ammonia, it can actually damage those very, very delicate early lungs. So talking about turnout, we've said that we need to get the vet to have a look at the limbs and hoof balance. If there's any problems whatsoever, we need to be really careful, because this is going to affect them lifelong. So the way their legs grow is affected by the way they weight bear. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you imagine, if their legs grow wonky, they end up weight bearing abnormally. So it's almost like a bundle of straws. So if you imagine you're holding on to a bundle of straws, if you put your weight more to one side of the bundle of straws, it will actually grow more wonky. And that's exactly what you can imagine with a foal's leg. And it's also true if you have any lameness in your foal at all. If they have less weight going through a sore leg, then actually over time that will produce a club foot. So you have to really take care. It's fair to say most foals are born with some sort of wonky legs, so don't panic. Most of them just self-correct in the first week or so of life, but it's important your vet's checked it, and you need to work with your farrier. So your farrier needs to have seen it by the latest within 2 weeks. And you need to get any errors corrected as soon as possible before the growth plates close, because you can modify it early on. Once the growth plates in their legs have fused, then you can't do anything about it. And long term, if you've got that asymmetry, it is likely to cause a long-term problem with your horse. And the main cause of retirement from ridden work is that type of lameness. So we need to rear your foals in an environment where you're going to encourage optimal musculoskeletal development. You want them to be playing with other foals, ideally. You want them to have exercise. You want them to be gambling and leaping around in the pasture, because all of that helps their lifelong physical welfare and also their mental well-being as well. So it is absolutely crucial. From a behaviour point of view, the younger you start handling, the better. And it's worth trying to think about putting a slip halter on literally on day one. But don't necessarily think that you're going to try and lead them around by that from day one. They're very, very delicate. A foal will always pull back from pressure on its head. So you need to handle them ideally with a towel around the neck and an arm around their hindquarters. So you're just sort of cuddling them round in a direction rather than pulling them. It's also important to pick their feet up daily from birth. And you can use positive reinforcement, so you can use scratchers so that you're actually training them using proper methods. And again, we've got in one of our British Horse Foundation recent sessions from our Better Beginnings conference, Yogi Breisner has done a wonderful video demonstration of how to start training a foal to pick its feet up, which might be nice for people to have a look at. You need to optimize the environment just to make sure that you promote positive experiences all the time. You need to build confidence in your foal and just do everything you can to reduce stressors and to actually treat your foal as an individual. So some foals are naturally more bold and others are naturally more cautious, and that will impact their long-term ability to learn. So you need to actually be working with them as individuals, and again is something that has been covered, and I'm sure, as you said, will be covered in the session tomorrow. So yeah, positive reinforcement, and make sure that you are building their confidence all the way so they're going to have a long and happy life.
Yeah, you're right, Jan. Professor Brad Hill tomorrow goes into quite some depth about equine learning theory and that pressure and release. So definitely listen to that one tomorrow. It's really interesting. So yeah, definitely one to listen to if you've got young horses in your life, or well, any horses, but with the lens we're on today, those young foals in your life. So we've covered quite a lot of information in quite a short space of time. If people are listening to this and they want to find out more about what we've talked about, maybe a bit more depth to it, where can they go to do that? What are some of the resources out there that are available?
There's a few places, and I'll just run through a couple of them, and Jan, I know, can run through one of the main ones. But the British Horse Foundation, we did a lot of work a few years ago with the British Horse Society, and we put together for their Challenge Awards about breeding. And there was 3 booklets that we did, and they were sort of to breed or not to breed, breeding and foaling, and care of the foal and the young horse. So these are 3 of their Challenge Awards. So through the British Horse Society, one can access and get these copies and see them. So that is, and they are very comprehensive. So that is through them. And also we have worked through the British Horse Foundation with the Pony Club, and we've been educating through the Pony Club, and also some of the instructors with the Pony Club. So those are a few areas that we've worked with, and Jan, I'll let you lead on.
Yeah, thank you, Edward. Yes, we were very fortunate to be funded by the Elise Pilkington Trust. So we actually were able to put a series of 4 webinars together for the Pony Club, which was directed really at the Pony Club instructors, so that those who were actually helping the B test and A test students through would have the background in breeding. So that worked really well. We also, through the British Horse Foundation, we have a British Horse Foundation website, and on there we have all the resources and all the links through to all the things Edward was talking about. We run a Better Beginnings conference once every 2 years, and all the conference recordings are in there. And we run a series of sessions and practical videos which cover all of those, which are linked and are also available. So we've had our first lot of those have been released. We've just had the one released with Yogi talking about, Yogi Breisner talking about holistic training, and they will continue throughout the rest of the year. So please do come to the website and have a look, and any questions, we'll be able to help you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jan. And we will also include the links to all the things mentioned on the Equine Health Week Hub on the British Equestrian website. So that's www.britishequestrian.org.uk. So you can find them there as well, along with many of the other resources that we're going to talk about over the course of this week. And you'll also be able to find all the podcast recordings there, as well as wherever you found this one, whichever platform you use to get your podcasts, and some of the graphics and other bits and pieces that we're going to be sharing across this week. This has been a really, really interesting conversation. Everyone, as I say, we've covered a lot. There's a lot of information there. My brain is a little bit from it, but it is really interesting, and hopefully it's given people plenty to think about in terms of breeding, whether it or not it is the right thing to do for their mare, and then how that process is going to look if they do decide to proceed with it. So thank you very much for giving up your time today to come and speak to us.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you everyone for listening as well. We hope you'll join us for the rest of Equine Health Week. As previously mentioned, tomorrow we are going to be looking at young horses and how we can lay the foundations for a successful future for them. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to Edward, to Jan and to Rebecca, and we will see you all soon. Thank you.